Good afternoon. I'm Christine Miller, Executive Director of the Utah State University Honors Program, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all, students, alumni, faculty, administrators, staff, friends, and community members, to the 50th Annual Honors Last Lecture. A special welcome to all you curious students who are here today actively taking the Honors Dare to Know. We are celebrating a special anniversary today. This is the 50th Annual Honors Last Lecture. The back of your program and up on the screen is a list of all the faculty who have delivered Honors Last Lectures since 1976. Some of these wonderful faculty members are here with us today. Would our past and present Honors Last Lecturers please stand, and would you all join me in giving them a big round of applause? If we could pull up the lights for a second. Thanks to each one of you for your outstanding work teaching and mentoring students, and for your many contributions to USU and to the University Honors Program. Each year, our students nominate professors who have made a true academic impact on their lives for the award of Honors Outstanding Professor of the Year. A committee of honors students interviews finalists and selects one exceptional professor, who then imagines and delivers what might be a last lecture if that professor had only one more to give here at USU. We are so pleased today to hear from our 2025 Honors Outstanding Professor, Dr. Fazilat Soukhakian from the Department of Art and Design in the College of Arts and Sciences. I know that every Honors Last Lecturer is a beloved professor, and so it's important to note that the lecture today will not actually be Dr. Soukhakian's last. We hope that she will continue talking with students and colleagues here at USU for many years to come. I'd like to extend special thanks to Hazel Harris-Staples, the student who nominated Dr. Soukhakian, and one of the co-chairs of the committee, and the other students who served on the last lecture committee. These students are Kirsten Reither, Hazel, Connor Brown, Avalie Dunkley, Yasamino Squeezada, and Grace Wheeler. I'd also like to thank the Performance Hall team and the USU Honors Program staff, especially Cassie Wyand and Jennifer Cortez, for their extensive planning and work behind the scenes to make this event a success. Hopefully. I guess we're early days. Sorry, that's not nice, Fazilat. I'm sorry about that. Before I introduce our Executive Vice Provost, I'm pleased to welcome all the faculty and administrators who are joining our students today in celebration of USU's extraordinary teaching and mentoring. Whether you're new to USU or have been teaching here for many years, I want to thank each one of you for supporting the University Honors Program and helping to make USU's classrooms some of the best in the world. It is now my great pleasure to welcome to the podium Utah State University's Executive Vice Provost, Dr. Paul Barr.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your outstanding leadership in the honors program at Utah State University. Welcome, and thank you all for being here. I would like to especially recognize the past presenters of the Honors Last Lecture who are here with us today. We are so grateful for your contribution and continued support at Utah State University. It's my pleasure to express Utah State University's support for this year's annual Honors Last Lecture and the 50-year tradition that we're celebrating today. The University Honors Program embodies USU's values of excellence, ambition, collaboration, courage, innovation, and respect. We are proud that the Honors Program and all who are part of it. The last lecture is the University Honors Program annual celebration of the outstanding teaching and research of USU's faculty. Each year since 1976, USU honors students have recognized faculty who have made a profound impact on their lives. Today, we are delighted to hear from Dr. Fazilat Soukhakian, the student committee selection as the 2025 Honors Outstanding Professor. In keeping with tradition, honors students will introduce Dr. Soukhakian. It is thus my pleasure to introduce Hazel Harris Staples, who nominated Dr. Soukhakian for this award. Hazel is a photography major with minors in entrepreneurship and art history. Hazel is involved on campus as a fine arts representative on the Honors Student Advisory Board, an Honors Peer Advisor, and serves as the Lifestyles Editor at the Utah State Statesman. She is a recipient of the Daniels Fund Scholarship. Please join with me in welcoming Hazel Harris Staples to the stage.
Hi everyone, my name is Hazel Harris Staples, and I have the honor of working with, learning from, and making art alongside Dr. Fazilat Soukhakian. Dr. Soukhakian, who asks her students to call her Fazilat, is an associate professor of photography in the Department of Art and Design. She is an extremely talented documentary photographer and visual storyteller whose work addresses social and political injustices while highlighting the resilience of the people around her. I first met Fazilat during a required introductory photography class and later had the opportunity to join the photography program, where she makes sure that each student feels welcome and capable, while also always encouraging us to think more deeply, work a little harder, and push our ideas further. One of my favorite courses I have taken from Fazilat is called Activism Through Art, a course where students are encouraged to examine the social and political injustices that surround them and create artwork that seeks to confront or address those issues. It was inspiring to see how she guided each student to make work that carried personal meaning while also speaking to a broader community. Beyond her talent as an artist and educator, Fazilat is an example to me personally. Her dedication and persistence remind me that art can be both a calling and a form of advocacy, and that there is space for each of us to make a difference through what we create. It is now my great honor and pleasure to present to you USU's 2025 Honors Outstanding Professor, Dr. Fazilat Soukhakian.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I know how busy it is, like the time of the year. It's super busy, and I'm really, truly appreciated for your time and for your support. A heartfelt thank you to Chris for your leadership and for shaping this program into something truly special. And to Chris again, Jennifer and Cassie, your tireless work over the past few months has made this event possible, and I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you to the Department of Art and Design, Kathy, and to all my amazing colleagues for your continuous encouragement. To Nick and the Kane School of the Arts, your constant support means so much. And to our new Mega College of Arts and Sciences, and a special thanks to Dean Joe for your leadership during this time of change, and for being here today. It truly means a lot. Also, Paul, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. It's a real honor to be giving the 50th Honors last lecture. Preparing for this time has been both exciting and humbling. In fact, I revisited every single recording of the previous sessions that was on the website. And I have to admit, that made me incredibly nervous. The bar is really high, but I want to say how deeply inspired I am by each and every one of you. The thoughtfulness, the research, and the heart behind every talk is just so amazing, and I hold deep respect for all of you who have spoken here before me. And finally, my deepest thanks to the student committee for selecting me this year. What an honor it is to be here. Your thoughtful questions during the interview and your brightness truly shaped the way I approach this lecture. Thank you for trusting me with this moment. But let me tell you, to plan this lecture, I try to follow, like any good academics, I try to follow the exact guideline behind the whole idea. If this were truly my last lecture, what would I say? And in true honors program fashion at USU, with a gentle touch from Chris, we all know the expectation is that we're encouraged to dive very deep, research extensively, reflect critically, and question everything, including our own mortality, which is fitting. Because let's see, the reward for being named Outstanding Honors Professor of the Year is apparently to deliver your last lecture. Nothing says congratulations like a gentle existential crisis. Thank you, Chris. But I meditated very hard on my last lecture, and I approached this as if it really might be the last time I stand in front of students and my colleagues. And after all, it was a very reflective time to think what wisdom might I offer. But let me tell you that the idea of this last lecture came to me during a very strange and turbulent chapter of my life. My homeland, Iran, the place where my story began, and a place where all my family still live there actually, is once again engulfed in chaos, perhaps way deeper than ever before. For 12 days, war raged, loud and brutal, and then just as suddenly it stopped. No resolution, no explanation, only silence and destruction. We were left disoriented and asking ourselves, what was it? Why did it begin and why did it end? I've never felt the pain of being far away so deeply before. Meanwhile, here in my adopted country, where I should now feel at home, I've been here about 15 years, we find ourselves under attack for the kind of work we do, the value of art, the freedom of thought, the heart of research, and what makes academia truly matter. All are being questioned, what we have dedicated our lives to. The world feels like it's in a very strange place right now. There's fire and flood, collapse and rebuilding, sometimes all at once. And the disturbing point is that some call it normal. And the headlines are very heavy with violence, division, fear. And we caught between grief and numbness, struggle to know how to respond. I really tried and I really wanted to make this lecture as light as possible and very hopeful. But I also realized that the most honest thing we can do, especially with our student, is to talk about how we are all feeling these days. It's okay to talk about the fact that this world and this life is not simple. It is messy, it is complicated, it's beautiful and overwhelming and full of possibilities all at once. To all the students here, students of honor, young minds full of passion and purpose, this is how we see you. You are not only navigating the complexity of this world, you are daring to transform it, to question it, to rebuild it from what came before, even when what came before wasn't always fair or whole. And now you are here to heal it and to reimagine it. And I want to tell you that that's something I don't take for granted. It is my absolute honor to play even a tiny part in your journey and to be called your mentor. And to all my colleagues here, the mentors, the professors, the artists, historians, the designers, musicians, scientists, engineers, biologists, and all the rest. You carry so much knowledge and you give so much of yourselves, even on the days when you want a moment of quiet. We all had those days. To create, to think, to write. The moment a student walks in, you show up. You believe in this generation. Thank you for your wisdom, your generosity, and your presence, and for making this work a little lighter and a lot more meaningful. Now, among all this complexity and connection, allow me to introduce myself, not in parts, but as a whole. I'm a photographer, a professor, an immigrant, a visual storyteller, an artist, a wife, a friend, and many more. A woman shaped by many words, many roles, and many in-betweens. And over time, through movement, memory, and making images, I've come to see the world not just through the lens of one country, one culture, or one identity, but as something shared and interwoven. I use my camera to reflect what I have lived, what I've witnessed, and what I continue to carry. Through stories, I see connection, not just documentation. To hold a mirror to the world and gently ask you, do you see what I see? Through my last lecture, I want to take you with me across landscapes and languages, through this space between culture, where differences often lives very loudly, but where sameness speaks much more quietly. As an immigrant, I no longer see the world in neat geographical boxes. To me, home has become a global idea, tied less to borders and more to belongings. This perspective has opened my work to a wider range of voices, stories, and human truths. In every image I make, I'm looking for that thread that connects us all. Through this lecture and through the photographs I'll share with you, I invite you to witness a journey of transformation. One where pain doesn't just wound us, but shapes us. Where the most personal stories reveal the most universal truths. Because what I've learned is this: though power, history, politics, and culture may divide us, our capacity for compassion, for resilience, and for becoming, that lives in all of us. And that's where I began. I was born in 1983, just a few years after the Islamic Revolution reshaped every corner of Iranian life. A revolution that promised justice, but brought with it a tidal wave of restrictions, especially on women. The air changed, the street changed, the very image of a woman becomes something to regulate and to erase. Much of what I know about that shift, I first saw not in history books, but in the quiet pages of our family photo albums. Those albums become my first lessons in politics, in loss, and in resistance. I would turn the pages slowly, and there she was, my mom, a young woman full of life, her body free, unafraid, in yard, at a school among friends. She was radiant in her freedom, full of purpose. But then suddenly the photos changed. Her hair disappeared beneath dark cloth, her arms, her shape, herself, hidden under layers that were not there before. And from that point forward, every image of her was marked by absence, but by what was no longer allowed to be seen. I was born into that silence. I never knew her as the woman in the early photographs. I only knew the woman shaped by a revolution, the woman who carried both compliance and a quiet defiance in her eyes. These albums become my archive, not just of personal memory, but of political reality. They taught me that history doesn't just happen in the streets or in the speeches. It happens in the living rooms, in the way we dress, in the way we tell our stories or choose not to. That is where my journey as an artist began, at the intersection of memory and erasure, between what is visible and what has been made invisible. Through my lens, I began to ask, what are we allowed to remember? And what happens when we dare to remember everything? Because I've come to realize is the quiet role of my camera, to remember what I might one day forget, to hold on to stories even when I no longer can. One day I may not be here to remember, but my photographs will. My mother's photographs told me everything before I had words to ask. In those early images before the revolution, she stood radiant and unbound, a woman inhabiting the full space of her body, her life, her freedom. But with the turn of history, her body too was claimed by the state. She adjusted like so many women did, not out of agreement, but out of necessity, out of quiet, dignified resistance masked as survival. And then I was born, her only daughter, a new generation, yet not free from the past, because history doesn't end. It continues through blood, through memory, through the way a mother dresses her daughter before stepping outside the house, in the quiet moments, in the things we don't say out loud anymore. What the revolution took from her, it tried to take from me too. But I was watching, I was listening. I was learning from those photographs, from the contrast between who she once was and who she was forced to become. And so as I grow, the story of my mom became the story of myself. It was within that inheritance that my project Forbidden Hair was born. This project is deeply rooted in memory and marked by the body as both subject and battleground. But this project is more than an idea. It carries the emotional weight of a moment from my past that left a permanent mark on me. In many traditional Muslim societies, including Iran, where I was raised, it is customary that when a girl reaches the age of puberty, which is 9-year-old, her body and her hair must be concealed. The body becomes shameful, the hair once playful, carefree, part of childhood is suddenly declared dangerous, a source of sin, a reason for punishment. I was 9 when I was told to cover my hair, not gently, not with understanding, but as law, as something enforced without room for question. One day, shortly after this new rule entered my life, my mom took me to the marketplace. It was a warm day, I wasn't wearing a scarf. That's when we ran into my 3rd grade teacher. She looked at me, she said nothing. But the next day in the classroom, she pointed to me in front of all the other children and said, "You will go to hell. You will be hung there by your hair in fire." I was only 9. That moment planted something inside me, not just fear, but confusion. Because as my body began to change, as I began to feel this strange, sacred power of becoming a woman, I was told again and again that my body was something to be hidden, that beauty was shame, that visibility was sin. And yet, I knew even then there was something powerful in what they wanted me to erase. That tension between visibility and erasure, between fear and self-discovery, became the heartbeat of Forbidden Hair. Through this work, I began to reclaim what had been stolen from me, the right to see myself and to be seen, to question the rules imposed on our bodies, to mourn what was taken, and to celebrate what survives. But now, let me pause here. Because far, far from where I was a child, in a world that might feel distant and different to you, did any of you ever feel something similar? Did any of you, especially our female students, grow up feeling that your body was not entirely your own, that your womanhood was something to defend, to protect, and to hide? Have you ever felt the sharpest sting of being told you were too much, too loud, and too visible? Have you ever felt the rules that try to shape you into something smaller, quieter, and easier to control? Because even oceans apart, the experience of being a woman, of growing into yourself under the weight of expectations and fear is not just mine, it is ours. As I began to question what I was told to hide, I also grew obsessed with a larger question. Who wanted this world I was born into? Who asked for the revolution that shapes my life? I began a project called This Is Me, a title both simple and confrontational, an act of claiming identity and of seeking to understand those who decades earlier had tried to claim a different future. I went looking for the people who once believed in the dream of change, those who flooded the streets of Iran in 1979, who shouted for justice, who waved flags, who tore down the previous regime with the fire of youth burning in their eyes. I needed to see them and to hear them, to understand how hope could turn into silence and how revolution could grow old. I found them 30 years later. Men and women shaped by time and memory. Their voices a little softer now, their hands more delicate. I photographed them as, I think this didn't change. I photographed them as they are now, wrinkled hands, shielding faces, not in fear of my lens, but perhaps in shame, perhaps in mourning, not mourning a death, but a transformation of a country, of themselves. I often wonder, does regret grow heavier with time? Do we ever stop wondering if we made the right choice? These were the people who once shouted for change, who demanded a new era, but history, as it always does, unfolded in unexpected ways. They didn't just grow older, they were reshaped. They were forced to revise their beliefs, to adapt their clothing, their language, even their sense of self, to survive in the very world they helped bring into life. And so I photographed them in spaces that matched their memories, decaying rooms with peeling wallpaper, abandoned buildings, flicker of a past once alive, now crumbling. I remember one woman very clearly. Her name was Puran. She was once a revolutionary. During our entire session, she covered her hair with her hands, not from my lens, but I believe from herself. For 2 hours, she whispered over and over, "I didn't fight for this to happen." What stays with me is how time and history required them to change. Not just their appearance, but their core identities. They become living records rewritten over and over by the changing tides of power. This Is Me is not just a portrait of aging, it is a portrait of what it means to believe in something so deeply that you let it change your life, only to look back and ask, what have we done? Through these images, I try to remember them not as they are now, but as they were then, full of ideals, of energy, of belief, and to hold a space for both the fire they carried and the ashes they now sit among. To our students, to the young minds in this room who are burning with questions, with passion, with purpose, I ask you to take a moment and think very deeply. You are standing at the edge of something very powerful, the beginning of a life shaped by choice, by a study, by work, by belief. So before you commit to a cause, before you raise your voice in defiance, before you fight for change, make sure you know what you are choosing. Study hard, read everything, ask questions that make others uncomfortable, ask questions that make you uncomfortable. Do your research, know the history your own, and the histories you inherit from others, because history doesn't end, it only changes hands. What you fight for now will shape the lives that come after you, just as those before you shape the world you're in. Know what you are standing for, know what you are willing to lose, know who might be affected if your vision of the future become real. Don't fight just to tear down walls, fight because you have built something better in your mind, something worth defending with your whole being. Because one day, you may find yourself, like Puran, like so many others, looking back, whispering, I didn't fight for this to happen. And so be brave, but be wise. Be bold, but be passionate and grounded. And never stop questioning what your passion is serving. And so, with that invitation to think deeply, to question, to study, and truly know what you are standing for, I want to ask you to close your eyes only if you feel comfortable, because it works either way. And think of someone who changed something for you. Not a famous leader, not someone in a history book, but someone close. Someone from your own small town, your classroom, your neighborhood, who has been your hero, whose presence made you feel safer or braver or more seen. Is there someone whose name you carry with you? Or maybe is there someone whose name you never knew, but who stayed with you anyway? Hold that person in your mind. Because as I share this next photograph with you, I am thinking of someone I never got to name, but whose courage still lives in me, even now. This image was taken in 2009 in Iran, a year etched in memory, a time of resistance, heartbreak, and a kind of hope that felt urgent, alive, and impossible to ignore. It was the year of green movement, mass protest everywhere, a rising of voices, crowds of people taking to the streets, demanding change, demanding a future different from the one they were handed, and in turn the government responded with violence, arresting protesters, silencing them, and in many cases, killing those who dared to speak. As I look at this photograph, I am reminded of the sunlight, sharp and clear, that cut through the air on that day at the University of Tehran. In the foreground, a young woman stands, her face hidden behind a cloth, a shield of protection. She knows the risk, the threat of arrest, the weight of being seen, and yet she stands as though she is made of something unbreakable. Her eyes, even in shadow, seem to carry the weight of something larger than herself. She leads not by title, not by privilege, but by the sheer force of her presence. Behind her, just out of frame, is a crowd. You can't see them, but you know they're there. A green banner bearing a message that's as direct as it is urgent. No war, no fascism. Simple words, but they hit hard. Like a shout against everything that is wrong. There's a tension here, the harsh light, the hidden faces, the beauty of resistance pressed against the fear of consequence. It's a moment of vulnerability and strength. The moment that captured here in this photograph is brief, but her quiet courage continues. I never learned her name, but she stayed with me, and I believe she changed something in me. I often think of the extraordinary women I knew in Iran, women who fought not always with signs or slogans, but with an unshakable presence. Some stood in the streets, shoulder to shoulder, risking arrest. Others fought quieter battles, running businesses despite endless restrictions, carving out a space in a society that told them they were too much or not enough. These women taught me that feminism is not something imported. It doesn't arrive wrapped in slogans or policies. It grows wherever a woman has been told no, simply because she's a woman and refuses to accept it. Each of these women in these photographs is a part of that resistance, regardless of religion, politics, or personal belief. They are all engaging with a world that often tries to silence them, and yet their courage persists. In their eyes, their movement, their choices, in the way they live their everyday lives with defiance. Before I show you the next project, let's pause again. I want to ask something of you. Try to step back from the story you've been told. Let go of the script that was written for you and question the narratives you've inherited. Look again, this time with curiosity. Take a moment before deciding you understand what you see. And most of all, resist the urge to turn them into others. And remember, no one wants to be reduced to a stereotype. When I first arrived in America, I often felt seen through a very narrow lens. There was quiet kind of pity for me and for all the poor women of Iran and perhaps Middle East or Muslim-born raised women, trapped in a very patriarchal system, waiting to be saved. It was a gaze shaped more by assumption than by truth. One filtered through distance, headlines, and half understood stories. And I thought by myself, is that how you really see us? Hopeless, helpless, and powerless? They didn't know that the women I was surrounded with have always been at the front line, not just of protest, but of culture, of scholarship, of survival. Their names should be on banners, yes, but not as victims, but as heroes. So I created an anonymous battle to gently and sometimes humorously confront this attitude. I photographed her in a long black chador, the most stereotyped image of a Muslim woman. And yet, there she was, riding a motorcycle, skateboarding, drinking, dancing, doing all the things she was told not to do, everything forbidden. And she danced like the heroines of the Shahnameh. And if you know, the Shahnameh is the ancient Persian epic that has always imagined women as fierce, wise, and free. Because the women I knew are not symbols of oppression. They are scholars, warriors, artists, rebels, dancing in rhythm with history and refusing always to disappear. And before I move on, I want to turn the question to you. How many times have you been misunderstood? How many times have you been seen through a lens that didn't belong to you, labeled before you were listened to? How many times have you felt someone look at you and decide you were a victim, when in truth you were actually the powerful one? We all carry stories that get simplified, flattened, turned into something easier to explain, but inside each of us is a more complex, more beautiful truth, one that rarely fits into headlines, hashtags, or someone else's assumption. So I invite you to think about this story that only you can tell. The version of you that resists categorization, the part of you that others overlook, but that you know is strong. Because this is where resilience begins, not in how others define you, but in how you hold onto your truth and your story, even when the world tries to rewrite it. And this is also the place where empathy begins, not from assuming you understand another's experiences, but from remembering how it feels when someone fails to understand yours. Let's go to the next story. My childhood was overwhelmed by the 8-year war between Iran and Iraq, a war that settled into the background of my life like permanent static. I was a child, but even then I understood. Peace was not a promise, but fragile and temporary. Those early years shaped something deep in me, not just fear, but a sensitivity to the fragility of life. Even now, after all these years, those memories remain vivid. They didn't stay behind when I left Iran, they traveled with me. I had hoped that by crossing oceans, I might leave war behind, but I learned very quickly, war follows you as memory, as silence, as something your body never forgets. And here in America, I began to meet others who carried their own invisible weight, American veterans who had returned from Afghanistan and Iraq, each with their own stories, their own shadows, and something unexpected happened. Though we stood on opposite sides of the geographical map, we recognized something in each other. The same hunted look in the eyes, the same flinch in crowded spaces, the same struggle to explain a kind of pain that defies language. In those moments, the war no longer had sides. There was no East or West, no enemy, no savior, only two human, scarred by histories larger than themselves, trying to keep living in the aftermath. That connection became the seed of my next body of work, staged photographs, imagining a world where two people from both sides of conflict don't meet as enemies, but as reflections of one another. These images are not records of what has been, but visions of what could be. What if, instead of building borders, we built bridges between our shared wounds? And sometimes, that vision steps out of the frame and into real life. A few years ago, I was still in Cincinnati. I was still a student, sitting at a bus station, distracted and tired, when a woman beside me turned and said, "Salam," which is hello in Farsi. The word was very familiar and honestly unexpected. I looked at her. How did she know my language? She smiled gently and told me she had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, learned some Pashto, a language not far from my own. We didn't say much after that, but before we parted ways, she said something I will never forget. The nightmares never really leave you. She didn't say it with drama or sorrow, just a quiet truth, one I recognized it instantly, because I've lived it too. In that moment, in her voice, I heard an echo of myself, of that little girl back in Iran, and I am so glad that the majority of you never experienced war, and hopefully we will never, ever experience it here, because war doesn't just destroy buildings. It marks the body, it changes people. And though in that moment, our flags were different, me and her, our uniforms and our languages, but our scars spoke the exact dialect. I met Kim and Amy in 2019 somewhere in Logan. A couple whose lives had been quietly but profoundly changed by the weight of prejudice. They had worked as daycare teachers, caring for children, until one day they were told they were no longer welcome. Not because of their work, but because of who they were. Their sexual orientation, they were told, was a bad influence. The parents didn't want their children exposed to a lesbian teacher. Their words stayed with me. Long after the conversation ended, it was raw, honest, and heavy. There was a quiet grief in their voices, not just from the loss of their job, but from the deeper injustice of being seen as dangerous when all they had offered was care. Their pain caught me off guard, and it reminded me sharply of friends I left behind in Iran, friends who also were forced to hide who they were, friends who lived under the constant threat of exposure, not just to lose a job, even their lives, because in Iran there is a death penalty for being gay. And yet, as I listened to Kim and Amy, I felt how close the suffering still is. Even here, even now, different countries, different laws, but the same wound. The rejection of people simply for being who they are. Let me show you some more photos of this series. As I show you some more images from this series, I wish I could take the time to tell you every story behind them. Each people I met carried their own unique, beautiful narrative of resilience, moments of quiet bravery, deep love, and unspoken loss. This is Amy and Aaron all the way home after the photo shoot. I couldn't stop thinking about what they had said, and I want to quote them. Being queer and working in the agriculture industry is not easy. Until we know if the person we are talking with is an ally, we don't use pet names. We don't stand too close. We don't touch. Some people will assume we're sisters. Some people won't ask our relation to each other. If asked, we'll be honest and say we're married, but we don't freely offer that information. Most people are tolerant enough to ignore our marriage. Some are tolerant enough to refuse to do business with us. Some embrace us, ask questions, and admit to us changing their minds about gay people, unquote. The reality they faced carefully navigating every interaction, constantly gauging the safety of their truths felt like a cruel reminder of how fragile acceptance can be. To live in a world where love must be hidden, where the simplest touch or term of endearment is something to fear, seemed an unimaginable burden. To be discriminated against simply for loving, for existing honesty in the world. That pain isn't abstract. It sits in the body. It shapes how you stand, how you speak, how you breathe in public. But what stayed with me even more wasn't the burden. It was the resilience. There was no bitterness in their voices, only clarity and quiet strength. Despite the judgment, despite the weariness of having to explain themselves over and over again, they had carved a life with dignity. And it was in that smallest moments when someone paused, asked a question, opened their heart, that something powerful happened. A quiet revolution, not shouted, but lived, not loud, but steady, one person at a time. So I learned something new with this project, something simple but life-changing, that revolution doesn't always roar, that change isn't only etched in the pages of history books. An activist isn't always someone with a headline or title. Sometimes they're sitting quietly in my classroom, a student fighting to stay in a school despite crushing financial hardship, someone battling mental health struggle in silence, someone who's been bullied, misjudged, overlooked, and still shows up, still moves forward with dignity. Sometimes revolution is just a letter written to someone in power, a hand raised in disagreement, a question asked bravely. And in all my travels from Iran to America, with all the oceans, languages, and politics between us, I began to see a truth that is so easy to forget. We, all of us, the people, despite all that makes us different, want the same things. We fear the same things. We cherish the same joy. We want a world that looks better than the one we inherited. We want unity, not division, a planet that can still breathe, animals that don't disappear quietly into extinction, equality that isn't conditional, dignity that doesn't have to be earned, the right to protest, the right to speak truth, the right to dream without fear. And above all, we all want to be seen as human and as whole. This project, Defiance, was born from that realization. It is about honoring the people who are rarely celebrated, the ones misunderstood, misjudged, sometimes labeled dangerous, but whose words, actions, and arts become the very catalyst for lasting change. It asks us to recognize that resistance is not a distant act, not something that only belongs to others, but something that binds us together across continents, cultures, generations. History, after all, is full of ordinary people who dare to defy the silence, and in doing so, they shape the world. So I began to travel from here to Dominican Republic, to Japan, Turkey, Dubai, Mexico, and beyond, not to find the famous, but the everyday revolutionaries, the one whose courage hides in plain sight, who fight for justice through the smallest acts of living honesty, of caring loudly, of showing up for others again and again. And I found them. Extraordinary people who are still my friends, people whose quiet revolutions changed me. There's one last story I want to share with you. It's one I don't often say out loud, but it's stitched into everything I've done. every image, every project, every story. The loss of my father was one of the deepest wounds I've carried. I hadn't seen him for 10 years before he passed, caught between one-way visa, a green card process, and then the travel ban hit. I never made it back, I can't go to Iran, but I couldn't even meet him somewhere near the border. And when he died, grief came very heavy, a kind of mourning that lingered. Sometimes after my father's death, I began making photographs as a way to process the pain. I turned to the ordinary, simple objects from our everyday life. Things that once felt insignificant, unnoticed, but after he was gone, they carried weight. They become vessels of memory. I began surrounding these objects and burying them with fresh flowers, beautiful, delicate, and fleeting, flowers that reminded me of life itself, so vivid, so full of presence, and yet so easily gone. It made me realize how much we overlook the beauty of what's right in front of us. The small, quiet moments, the everyday things, the people we assume will always be there. I was on a flight, editing these images on my laptop, still heavy in that space of loss, when the man sitting next to me leaned over and asked about the project. He was from Idaho, he was a farmer, he listened very quietly, and when he started to speak, his voice was shaking, and then he began to apologize. I told him, "You didn't do anything wrong," but he shook his head and said, "I didn't understand. I used to think immigrants just came and went freely, that it was easy, that they took more than they gave." He said, "I never thought about what it might cost, about the things you miss, the people you can't get back to." And then he said something. He said, "I don't ever want someone to feel what you felt. I need to learn more. Perhaps I didn't know enough." In that moment on an airplane between two cities, something shifted. One conversation, one stranger, one story. This is why artists make art, why we tell our stories. Because even in a divided world, a quiet revolution begins like this. When, in my case, a man from Idaho learns how grief can cross borders. When someone who thought they were separate suddenly see they are part of the exact same story. So thank you for choosing me to speak, for letting me be a small, tiny part of your becoming. Now go out there, first reception, but after that. Challenge the limits, but do it very kindly. Ask the questions no one's brave enough to ask. Tell the stories that need to be heard. And more importantly, take this beautiful, broken, complicated world and make it matter and make it yours. Thank you.
You want to say that?
Thank you, everybody, for being here again and for giving me the chance to talk to you. I am very absolutely honored to be here. I love all my students, and I am very honored to be surrounded by these beautiful souls, my colleagues and my students. Thank you.
The applause says it, but I'll say it again. Thank you, Dr. Soukhakian. Before we close, I invite Hazel Harris-Staples and members of the Honors Last Lecture Committee on stage to present Dr. Soukhakian with the 2025 Honors Outstanding Professor Award and a memento of her talk today. The committee is then going to stay on stage for some photos afterwards. Congratulations, Dr. Soukhakian, on this well-deserved recognition, and thank you all for celebrating the 50th Annual Honors Last Lecture with us. We look forward to what the next 50 years will bring to USU and to the University Honors Program. While this group remains on stage to take some photos, I invite you all to join us in the lobby for a reception and the opportunity to talk with Dr. Soukhakian. I look forward to visiting with you out there as well. Thank you again for coming.